Well, you found me. This is the Vintage Woodshop. I'm Sandy, and as I like to say, welcome to my playpen.
You're back. Cool. As a result of the responses to my last video, and at the insistence of my wife, I'm going to do something that I never thought I would on this channel, and that is a back to basics. Go back to when I was starting as a turner decades ago and just go through the normal steps that have become so habitual that it's just automatic for me. I don't even think about the things I do, I just do them. And the first of them is the basic sharpen the tools. I have an iPhone set up back here, and I will shoot some close-ups of this, but here is my bowl turning arsenal. This is a Hunter Hurricane with a number 3 cutter on it. Of course, the 3 easy wood carbides, those are what I turn with 85% of the time, depending on the material. If I'm on resin, I very rarely use the bowl gouges. If I'm on resin, I am turning with carbide because I am more successful at turning resin with carbide. Go with the tools that work for you. I do have 5/8 Ellsworth gouge, 1/2-inch Sorby, and these 3 scrapers that I bought from Hurricane off of Amazon. Good tools. I turned them in. I ground them as negative rake, and parting tool from Sorby. Then, for sharpening, again, you'll have a close-up of it in a couple of minutes here. Years and years ago, best money ever spent. One-way jigs, it's set up under there, and as you can see in the background, that grinder is not a slow-speed grinder, couldn't afford one. High-speed grinder, CBN wheels, and I get good, consistent edges. When I ordered the Ellsworth gouge, he kindly sent along his own jig that works perfectly, and I'm going to go through the process of setting this up. Going to show this in real time to see how little time it takes to get your tools ready to go. Let's hit it. Little wooden block attached to the bench that has a hole in it that's 2 inches deep. So that is showing 2 inches of the gouge. It's ready to go. Same thing on the 1/2-inch Sorby. And you're not going to be able to hear me because I'm going to turn this sucker on. While this thing is speeding up, I'm going to use the Allen tool to turn the blades on 2 of the carbide tools. Both the carbide tools, both of the carbide tools are now ready to go, and the grinder's up to speed. I can sharpen all 5 of these tools. done. The tool that you didn't get to see was on the right side of the grinder. The one-way system comes with this. It's a good platform. Adjustable, in and out, and it serves the purpose of that. But way back in the day, there was this guy named Robo Hippie. Look him up on YouTube. Superb turn. Very knowledgeable man. Machinist as well. He did this. I'm going to do a close-up with the iPhone. He created the Robo Rest. And it's a genius piece of kit. It pivots so that the platform never intrudes on the wheel, and it's marked in 5-degree increments so that you can take it everywhere from 90 degrees to 25. And what I've done is I've marked the tools that have maybe 2 different settings or 1 different setting. If I'm sharpening them on this platform, I use my engraver to engrave the angles at which this needs to be set. This sets very quickly, very accurately. I don't know if you can buy them anymore, but the one-way would serve with angle finders. Look those up on YouTube as well. Okay. So to continue with the back to basics theme, basic question, a lot of people ask, where do you get your wood? Well, several sources. You can go buy wood. Wood's becoming extraordinarily expensive. You can go pick up wood off the ground. I've got a piece behind me that's a fog log, F-O-G, found on ground, which is a term that we use when we have no idea what the heck this piece of wood is. This piece of wood is going back to basics. You can say this piece of wood is dripping wet. It's dripping wet because I just went in the backyard and picked it up, and it rained last night. And not only that, I had it standing end up. So it is wet. We may be slinging water on the ceiling in a couple of minutes. But green wood is way fun. It's messy, but it's way fun to turn because you're going to see stuff coming off of it. It's a hot knife through butter, literally. So this is a tree that we dropped in our backyard last summer. It's a piece of tulip poplar. It's kind of a hardwood. I've heard people say that tulip is nasty stuff to turn. That hasn't been my experience. I've turned, or poplar that is, that poplar is not a fun wood to turn, and I've not found that to be true. I have turned a lot of poplar very successfully, and I've enjoyed doing it. So we're going to take this piece of wood and go through the basic steps. The first thing we have to do is get it shortened down a little bit. It wouldn't be much fun chucking that up on the lathe. Then we've got to deal with cutting it in half so we can make a bowl out of it. We'll talk about that. So the first thing we want to do, this thing is about 10 inches wide there. It's 9 inches wide there. Kind of makes sense to do a bowl out of it like this. It's going to be a little more larger in diameter. So where do I cut it off? I want to have a little wiggle room. So I'm gonna give myself about an inch to play with. I'm just gonna put a mark on here and toss this thing on the bandsaw and cut it off so that it is 11 inches long. Then we'll cut it in half. We'll be back to talk about where we cut it in half and why, or why not. Can you see the water falling out of it? To some, this would be a no-no, because most wood turners are going to say, or it's not uncommon to see on YouTube, when you're going to split that log, get rid of the pith. And that's good advice, because the wood is going to dry more rapidly here than it does out here. And if you leave the pith in, you can have absolutely disastrous results. Way back, like almost 4 years ago, I harvested this chunk of cherry, and you've seen some of the projects I've done with the cherry, but check out what leaving the pith. Do this on the other camera. That's the pith. There's the pith. And this bowl was round when I took it off the lathe. That spigot, as they call it across the pond, was absolutely round. We call them tenons here on this side of the Atlantic. But that is what leaving the pith in the wood will do. Now, as I said, I did that on purpose because I've been doing stuff so long that I don't like doing the same thing over and over again. Whenever I took a commission, if somebody wanted me to build something that I had built previously, I wouldn't take commission, because the fun in doing a project is figuring out how to do it the first time. The second one's work. So I have never chosen to work. Why do I leave the pith in? To create problems. When the wood dries, it's going to crack. When it cracks, it's going to create more interesting features. If you want to make perfect bowls, make perfect bowls. That's what makes you happy. I don't like perfect bowls. My wife doesn't like perfect bowls. You remember this one? She loves that one, and she loves the matte finish. Some of you enjoyed the matte finish as well. This would have been a boring bowl if it had looked like that all the way around. But leaving the side where the chainsaw hit it, leaving the bark inclusions, leaving the branch inclusions, leaving the bark inclusions where the chainsaw hit it, all of that made this a bowl with a lot of character. And it's not boring. So what are we going to do with these pieces back here? Let's check them out. What remains to be done with these now is to let's go back to basics. I won't bother putting the circle cutting jig on the bandsaw because some of you guys don't have one. So I'll just go back to good old-fashioned knock some of the edges off and see what happens when it hits the lathe. So I got this circular gizmo, bought this thing on Amazon for a couple of bucks, and serendipitously, it's just about the size I need. So I'm gonna put that right there. I have found center. I'll mark center, little bitty screw hole, because this is where I'm going to mount it. Now I'm going to center, flip this puppy over, and find something that looks like center here. This stuff's really heavy. I'll get out a scale in a minute. We'll find out just how much it weighs. So now that we got the wood all ready to go, how do we put it on the lathe? A bunch of different ways. Probably the most common way would be with a faceplate. You see guys on YouTube doing faceplates all the time. Very popular way. I have used faceplates. I use faceplates on really, really big pieces of wood. This isn't a big piece of wood, so we can put these away. There's this thing. I've used it a couple times on green wood, big chunks of green wood. It mounts up nice and fast, but I'm not real sure. As you can tell from the background, I prefer chucks. I have 8 of them. I've got 5 of the one-way strongholds and 3 talons. And the Longworth chuck down there, we'll talk about that sometime down the road. At any rate, my go-to chuck is this one right here, and the tool that I use with it is one of 2 things. I either use a spur drive, but my favorite, straight up, the worm screw. And the worm screw goes right there.
We just go ahead and spin this on to the headstock. And this goes in here just like this. Wiggle it back and forth a little bit. And it's ready to go. Now the beauty of that is you've got that big heavy duty screw right there, and I'm just going to go pick up that piece of wood, put a slightly larger hole in it than is there already, and we'll see how easily this mounts. Here we go.
Now, practice sand. Science.
Let's see which of the 2 looks more interesting. This one will end up being a little deeper. Let's put this one on the lathe.
This big old mustard monster is a Powermatic 4224B. And it is just a really, really good lathe. This is the 4th lathe I'd owned in my life. Gradually worked up from an old Craftsman tube lathe. Did a lot of work on one of those back in the day. But this old girl has paid for herself many, many, many times. Mounted, ready to go. Nothing more basic than that. Very secure. Locked, spindle locked down. Now it's nice and tight. Don't want to go too hard on green wood. I could pull the threads out, but this is very secure. But despite the fact that it's secure, I am going to pull the tailstock up to give it support while I get it balanced and turn a tenon on the bottom of it. Again, my theme, back to basics. I generally don't turn tenons on the bottom of a piece of wood because if you turn a tenon onto the bottom of a piece of wood, as you're about to see, you're going to lose height. In this case, turning a tenon on here is probably going to reduce the height of this bowl by at least an inch, if not more. So, let's get busy spinning this thing, making shavings, and wait till you see how the shavings fly. This is going to be fun. I'm going to get wet. When I'm bringing my live center up, the tailstock up, I like to turn the wood on and let the live center find its own way. Sometimes it might be a little off, a little wonky, but this seems to work out. Again, basically, that's best. And it's there. Safety first. Notice it's cold out here. Well, it's California cold. No long sleeves. Long sleeves can get wound up and stuck. I forget to do this one. When I was in the Navy, I was a corpsman in the Navy. There were a couple times when there were men aboard ship that lost their fingers to rings. Some of them were machinists, some of them were electricians. At any rate, this goes on a hook on the wall. And remember those famous words of Norm Abrams on This Old House. Be sure to read all of the instructions and the safety stuff and yada, yada, yada. And wear these safety glasses. Amen. I can't get away without them because mine are bifocals and I can actually see better with them, so it's cool. Back to the wood.
Okay, I thought that was so weird.
Oh, well,
I'm freezing.
come in and say hi to my guests.
Oh, hell no.
Well, hell yes. I'm talking with my
Face.
wife here. I'm talking with my wife here. Okay, here we go. Let's crank this thing up. Let's just see safety first. When you're first spinning this thing, I had a piece of willow one time that looked pretty good. I was cranking it up and half of it came flying off and poked a hole in the ceiling. At any rate, we're going to spin this thing up while I stand somewhere that is not downrange.
Nice little water. Cool. I got it running right under 600. So I'm going to come after this with the bow gouge. And with the carbide tools, I'm going to switch off from time to time, depending upon whichever one is the most comfortable for me to use.
How do you use a bowl gouge? I'm not going to explain the whole thing. I don't use it well. They keep saying you got to ride the bevel. That's true. Riding the bevel is going to be dependent upon where you have the tool rest and the height of the handle. So typically you're going to shove that thing up in there and let the bevel, get the bevel riding, and then slowly turn the tool and raise the handle until you engage the edge. And it's all a matter of practice. Some old-time wood turners get real snobbish. This famous guy, a bunch of years ago, I bought some equipment from him, but he said two things that are noteworthy, one of which I admired and the other which I did not. The first one was, working over there on the bandsaw, he insisted that's the most dangerous tool in a wood turner's shop. The bandsaw is responsible for more injuries in a wood turner shop than any other thing. And I believe it. The second thing he said, with which I was really not particularly impressed, was you got to learn how to use traditional gouges, because if you're using carbide, you're just scraping by. Well, I'll call BS on that, because most of the lathe work I've done, and I have done a considerable amount, I've done with this tool right here. I wore out one of these discs, the little circular disc, because I sharpened them. And it didn't wear it out. The screw actually got all screwed up, and I broke the disc taking it off, and it was probably a 1/16 of an inch narrower than the new one was, simply because I sharpened it so many times. So that's my favorite tool. This one I use when I want to throw huge chunks of wood off something easy like this. So let's go back to it. I'm going to move the other camera so you can see the chips flying. The one thing I do prefer about the bowl gouge is this. By turning the flutes and angling the handle, you can actually direct where the chips are going to fly. Just like in that last video, I said I can make these go. I can kind of steer them. When I got carbide on there, they're going to hit you right in the mush. And I screwed up. I don't have a mask on. Taking care of that right now. Now we're ready. Ride the bevel, lift the handle, rotate it around, and point the chip at the other camera.
Now you get to live vicariously and see what it looks like when the shavings are hitting you right in the mush.
Little fine shaving, called a shear scraping. So now we got to make some design decisions. Some interesting colors in here. Didn't see those the first time. At any rate, I didn't quite get this thing centered, so I've got a bar conclusion. Am I going to leave that bar conclusion, or am I going to turn this thing down another ½ inch? Take another ½ inch off the diameter to get rid of the bark. And I don't think I will. But I do have to knock these corners off. We do have to turn this down to get a tenon on it. So let's get busy. And I don't know if I'm going to carry on with the bull gouge or go to the easy wood rougher. We'll see what happens. Depends on how hard this thing starts beating on me.
And it didn't take long. I switched up to the easy wood rougher right away.
Look how the cut is that much different with this than this. Because with this, I am just scraping by. With the bull gouge, I was cutting. But this is all going away, so I don't really care what it looks like. And this is green wood, so it is really, really soft. And once again, using the carbide tool, I can use this edge or this edge. If I use this edge, this stuff comes back in my face. If I use this edge, it goes flying clear across the shop that way. And the shop is covered. So let's go back to work.
I do have to admit that when I switch over to the bull gouge and I can make it work, I just love watching the huge shavings that come flying off that blank. Kind of interesting as you're watching this going by extremely quickly. Watch the little picture in the picture and you can see the RPMs at which the lathe is turning.
I turned off most of that bark. The other side's all nice and clean. You can see where cracks are developing in this already. It needs to be turned down a little further because I need at least a 4-inch diameter here or a little under. So I've got something to grab this when I flip it. So this is going to have to be turned down a little bit further. And this has to be turned so I've got clean wood to create a tenon.
When I say flip it, I am referring to dismounting the blank from the chuck that it's currently mounting on and reverse chucking it. That is what the new tenon is for, the reverse chucking.
Just what exactly creates a good tenon? It has to be safe. So here's the deal. This has to be shaped to meet up with the inside of these, and these are called dovetail jaws. They're angled in a little bit. So you want this edge to be here. That's what the chucks are designed to do. You don't want this tenon to be so thick that it bottoms out on the jaws. And the tenon is the chuck that it's mounted on is the 4-incher. So I need to measure this, turn this just so that it's a tad bigger, and get rid of this. This bumpy out part here has to go. We'll take care of that next. This is currently about 1/4 of an inch. It could be as much as a half or just a bit under. So I'm going to peel off a little bit more wood and this thing will be ready to go. This is the surface it's going to sit on. We don't want this surface touching the jaw. bit over 4 inches. Perfect. Now we're using the Easy Wood detailer, this nice diamond-shaped thing, for 2 reasons. First of all, this edge right here is perfectly perpendicular to the axis on the lathe. It's got to be angled in like this. So we can do that here, and this is the perfect tool for taking the nub off. Here we go. Wish you could feel how wet that stuff is. Okay, you can see this already starting to crack. This is going to be problematic on the finished bowl, but not too bad because it doesn't go too deep. So now we got to get this thing off of there, which could end up being a problem. But these chucks have a screw on them that allows you to lock them down to the spindle. And sometimes, if you're living right, you can back them off and life is good. If not, then you just take this and open up the chuck, and if it's on there nice and tight, this can be a problem. But you open this up and the whole thing falls off with this still in there, and then you get a big pair of channel locks or a long wrench or something like that and clamp the thing to a bench and work it out that way. But this one went easy. This is good for a back to basics. Okay. So now we have a wet chunk of wood that's going to go right like Captain Eddie said, making shavings. Back to basics. Where do you put the tool rest? For carbide tools, the way you get a catch with a carbide tool is if the angle of the blade is greater than 90 degrees, it's going to be cutting in instead of scraping. So this thing is just a little bit below center. To keep that angle to where it is scraping instead of cutting in. If it goes like that, you're going to get a catch. Now this thing is wet. I am damp. Here we go some more. There's two ways we can go with this bowl. This bowl's 10 inches wide. And I've already determined what's going to happen here because I've turned it thinner than you're supposed to. We have once turned bowls and twice turned bowls. Typically with green wood, we turn them twice. Rough it out, leaving 1/10 of an inch for each inch of diameter. So if I was going to follow the rule on this thing, I would have left this an inch wide, get it down so that it's exactly the same thickness all the way through the entire curvature of the bowl. Peel off that bark, get it all cleaned up, and then set it aside, put it in a kiln, do something, and 6 months from now we could finish it. That's on a twice turned bowl. I decided we're probably going to finish this thing today because we're going to cheat. So there's a crack in that pith already. Got my handy dandy bowl thickness gauge. Bought this years ago. Might still be available. Comes in handy occasionally. Here's how it works. You put it on the edge of the bowl, and each one of these little lines pops up. It's 1/8 of an inch. The black lines are 1/4 of an inch apart. The red lines are 1/4 of an inch apart. So let's put this on here and figure out how thick this thing is. And according to the gauge, it's one red line past the third black one. So it's a little over 3/4 of an inch thick right there. But when I bring it around to the back, the bottom is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 black lines. So it's 1.25 inches. Too thick on the bottom. Time to take a little more wood off.
Weather. So a little bit of bumpy. Clean it up. Whip. Butter.
So there are several ways of drying a green bowl. On YouTube, there have got to be 100 different videos about how to cure a green bowl. Some people dip them in alcohol for a while because alcohol is going to combine with water and it's going to evaporate it more quickly. Some guys are building kilns out of old refrigerators and using a regular old incandescent light bulb to heat them. There's a guy up in Canada that does that with a great deal of success. But I don't have that kind of money, nor do I have that kind of patience. So I want to finish this bowl today. We started this video right around 11 o'clock. It's 3 o'clock right now. Let's see how close we can get. So if I was a sneaky little booger and incredibly stupid, I would take this in the house and put it in my wife's microwave oven. But if I were to do that, I would be condemned to living in Chateau de Bow Wow for the rest of my days. So I've got a microwave oven right here in the shop.
I have microwave wood before. Again, check out YouTube videos. But I'm going to nuke this thing, and I'll show you little bits and pieces of it. But it is a long, boring process. I will probably have it in the microwave oven for a total of anywhere from 30 minutes to 60 minutes, depending on various things. And I'll bring you back and show you what those things are. But while it's nuking, I'm going to clean things up. So, I'll be back. Now this thing is going to become oval. It's going to shrink this way, and it's very, very hot. It's been in the microwave oven for 10 minutes. Went in weighing 1224. Well, let's see what it weighs now. It's lost 224 grams of weight. .2 kilos is a little over 2 pounds, probably 2.5 pounds. So it's lost a little bit of weight. It was in the microwave oven for 10 minutes. I think I'm going to throw it in there for another 5 and see what happens.
Okay, we're back at it. This thing, it's been an hour. During that hour, the bowl was in the microwave oven for a total of 20 minutes. It has gone from 1,224 grams down to 920. So it's lost well over 300 grams, which is about 6/10 of a pound just in water weight. It's no longer round. There's that. And there's that. If I laid this on the table, it's no longer flat. You can see that these edges are higher than these edges. So what I'm going to do now is chuck this thing back up on the lathe temporarily. I'm going to soak it in alcohol. The alcohol is going to combine with the water that is remaining in there and help dry it off a little more rapidly, which may allow us to put a finish on this thing today. We'll see. This is what I'm using, since in California, the EPA has decided that regular alcohol is too much of a pollutant. Have to buy this through the camping store. It is cheaper than the other stuff, but it's kind of a pain in the neck to get a hold of. Normally that would be a really fun part. If you have some really pretty wood, putting the alcohol on there is almost as good as putting the first part of your finish on. With poplar doesn't change much when you start doing things to it. It starts off white and kind of gets whiter. We'll be back. Have to let this dry. Have to let this flash off,
Because after all, I showed you that that was stove fuel. So I suspect that heating it in a microwave oven and then perhaps providing a little spark to it may have less than desirable effects here in the shop. I'll be back when this is dried and I've run it for another 5 minutes in the microwave. It has now spent a total of 25 minutes being microwaved. You can see that it is no longer flat. I showed you a few minutes ago that it is no longer round. I'm going to give this some time to finish. All that steam that's coming off there is evaporating water, so it's losing more weight. And in about 15 minutes, this thing will have cooled sufficiently. I will weigh it one last time. We'll chuck it back up on the lathe and decide what we're going to do with it. Okay, here we go. This thing's down to 801 grams. So that means we've lost over 400 grams. 450 something is a pound. So almost 1 pound of water has disappeared from this thing. In the process, as I've shown you already, it is no longer flat, it is no longer round. In fact, we may have a problem because, as you can see here, this thing is almost 9 3/4 inches long this way, and it is only not quite 9.5 inches this way. As you should recall, we've got a bowl thickness here of 5/8, maybe 3/4. So I want to make this round. I'm going to make this round and decide whether I want to flatten it off or not, and see how close to finished we can get with this thing today. Since that chalk is only hanging on to the very ends of this, because this is the part that's wider, I'm going to do a little safety check here. Just run this in here to give this thing a little more support while I flatten off the top. And here we go with the last one. Little hint. When I first mounted the cold jaws, every time I had to move all 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of them, I kept having to figure out which hole they went in, and then I'm having to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So now I just took a Sharpie, spun this thing, and drew lines, and whatever line this one's on is the line that this one needs to go on. That's the line that it was on. And why am I not using a power driver? I did use a power driver for a while, especially for popping them out. And then one day I got wise and I was going to use it for the power driver to get in, and naturally it got cross-threaded, had to buy a tap, and I saved that one hole and decided not to threaten any of the rest of them. So yeah, it's slow, but it's saving the gear. I'm pleased to see that that went into the original dimple. Let me get another camera and show you how bad out of round that tenon is. Let's make it round again. Another safety point, the manufacturers of the coal jaws recommend that you not turn them faster than 500 RPM. Now I have reestablished a nice round tenon that is not too tall, so it's not going to bottom out in the chuck. And you can see that it's got that nice dovetail shape to it. That, when we get done with this thing, will become the foot of the bowl. Cool? Remember way back at the beginning of this video when I first mounted this thing and there was a lot of room between the jaws? It's because the tenon was bigger than it needed to be. That's why I made the tenon bigger than it needed to be, is because I knew it was going to become out of round. And I wanted enough left over so that when I mounted it on this chuck, there was enough there to use this chuck. And I guessed pretty close. The closer that thing is to being touching, the closer to a perfect circle, the more contact there is on that tenon, the safer the turning is.
What I failed to mention during the previous voiceover is the difference between a tenon and a mortise. A tenon is a sticky out part. A mortise is a hole that you cut in the bottom of the bowl. The reason I use tenons is to waste less wood, and a mortise just wastes more wood, in my humble opinion. Furthermore, I am no engineer, but compressing wood to me seems like a more stable way of hanging onto it than pushing it apart, like when you're splitting firewood.
Now, as I turn, I don't watch my tool right here. As I'm coming across, I'm watching the horizon right here because I can see the details of the cut occurring right here, kind of where you guys are looking from right here. You can see that. You can see that right on the horizon of the bowl. The scraper is getting rid of most of the tool marks, but it is a scraper. And it's doing a pretty good job. That's not scraping, that's cutting. That's making some nice, fine little shavings. So it's not entirely just scraping the wood off, but it is scraping. And as a result of scraping, I'm getting a little bit of tear out here. You can see the tear out right here. I can feel the tear out right there. But all in all, it's a pretty good finish. That's going to be a problem, but I got an idea of how to cure it. And as you saw me with the Easy Wood Finisher, this thing's still drying. It's still moving. It has gotten out of round since I remounted it, and will continue to do so even after we finish it. Time to go to the inside. Little hint was CA glue. I buy a bunch of this stuff because I use it. It's really, really handy stuff. But sometimes that little nozzle gets... So I have a case of these, a bunch of these. You buy like 150 of them for a couple of bucks on Amazon. And I've got it sitting over there on the shelf above the grinding station to do this. Okay, that opened that back up. And most importantly, when I go to pop a wrench in there, I use the map pin to clean out the hole so that I don't strip the screw out. Just a handy little hint. And this may just blow the whole thing up. I am going to put some activator on it to get that to go off. And there we go. And that's when it starts stinking. Not too bad. Let that activator soak in. Then I'll spin it and knock that top down with a scraper, and we'll see how bad I boogered up that bowl. Time for the power helmet.
Not only was it time for the power helmet, but for the dust collection system and the air purifier to be run, because I ended up grinding and sanding that bark inclusion and all of that CA glue completely off the ball. It was a waste of time and money. Lesson learned.
You can tell how green this wood is yet because of the sandpaper getting clogged up. I've gone from 80 to 120 on this sanding pad, which is a pretty tough one. Now I'm switching drills or motors, whatever, and I will go through 400 with the softer one. As I sand, remember that the wood is turning in this direction most of the time. And the drill is moving in the opposite direction. All kinds of different opinions on how fast this wood should be turning. I'm turning it at about 700 right now. That's kind of a very comfortable speed for me. But I'm very careful about what part of the sanding disc I am applying to the wood, because I don't want grooves to get cut in the wood. I want it to be scrubbing across the grooves that it's creating. And of course, with the decreasing grit, each set of grooves gets a little smaller until we can't see them. So on the inside of the bowl, with the wood coming up like this, I am angling the drill motor so that the sandpaper is going across the grain. On the outside, I use this part because it's coming down like that. This is going across like that. And towards the bottom of the bowl, when I start getting in behind the chuck, then this is coming up, and I'm just very, very careful about what part of the sanding disc is being applied to the wood. Let's finish this thing up. That's got it all cleaned up so that I can put some sanding sealer on it. And sanding sealer, poor man's sanding sealer is half shellac, half alcohol. Fine scientific calculation. Now this is a pretty handy dandy little concoction, because if we just add that much boiled linseed to it oil, we've got shine juice. But we're not doing that yet. We're just going to seal this up. I've sanded it to 320. I'm going to put the sanding sealer on, a couple coats, let it go off, and then I'll do it with 400 and a 3M pad. Be careful when you're disposing of paper towels and rags in the shop. Some of the stuff that we use in here can create spontaneous ignition. So when I'm done with these paper towels, I end up laying them out flat. Alcohol is pretty safe. It's going to go off real quick. Shellac goes off very well too, until you get to the point where you mix the boiled linseed oil in it. And I have heard horror stories about boiled linseed oil causing problems. So be aware that those problems exist. And this is going to take a little while to dry because it is semi-cold in here today. Of course, this is California, so semi-cold is pretty nice and toasty warm for some of you other guys. It's a balmy 50 degrees in here right now. So I'm going to shut this off until this is ready to do some more sanding. .3M. It's nice and smooth this way, and it feels some stuff this way. So I'm going to roll this thing backwards, hit it with some 320 some more, then hit it with some 400, going both ways. I've got some real rough stuff over here on this end grain. Same thing right here. See if I can smooth that out. The rest of it's feeling pretty good. And we'll get a finish on this thing today. For joy, for joy. On some woods, you put this stuff on and the color just pops up. It's not going to change that much, a little bit. You can see a little crack developing here. And as you look at the edge of this bowl, it's still drying and it's still going out of whack. Well, it's kind of cool. I'm looking at it in the monitor and I'm seeing little chatoyance down here. That's kind of nice. I didn't even expect that. And as you can see, we have a very nice little finish going here. Very simple little bowl. And there's nothing on it but sanding sealer, which is some shellac, the Axe paste, which is a sanding paste. Now we'll put a little bit of polish on it. After that, I will finish it off with some OB's Shine Juice. You should need to be reminded that Shine Juice is equal parts of alcohol, shellac, and boiled linseed oil. and make sure you mind the rags with the boiled linseed oil on them. So, a little bit of polish, we'll see what that does for it, and then we'll go to the shine juice. Pretty, pretty, pretty. Nothing we've put on there is a permanent finish. The OB's shine juice is, as I said, 1/3 alcohol, 1/3 shellac, and 1/3 oiled linseed oil. Don't use real linseed oil. It's got to be boiled. Linseed oil never dries. Another perfectly measured scientific application. And these are the rags you have to dispose of carefully. OB Shine Juice is a friction polish. So the faster the thing is going, the better it burns the stuff into the finish. I will be turning at probably 1200 RPM. This is how you can tell if it's working. You push this against the bowl and I've got a real slick spot there. Not only that, I can feel the heat coming through the paper towel. And you can't see it yet, but this has a nice little permanent shiny finish on the outside. Now we'll do the inside. I'm going to do that 2 or 3 more times. I will bring you back when I am ready to reverse mount this thing. I'm going to put it back on the cold jaws because the bottom of this thing needs to be finished. It's ready. We're going to pop this puppy off of here. Now, they say in bowl design that the foot is supposed to be 1/3 of the diameter of the bowl. Let's see what we've ended up with, just for giggles. This thing is now down to 9 1/8. Remember, it was 9 1/2, 9 3/4 when we got finished with messing around with it outside of the microwave oven. So 1/3 of 9 is a little over 3. Son of a gun. How did that happen? I must be good. So here we go. We're going to put this in the cold jaws and make the bottom as pretty as the rest of it. Now, what I did was loosen up the cold jaws. I want to tighten up this, which is going to force the bowl up against the cold jaws to make it that much more secure. And I lined up the hole so that it's between 2 of the little rubber bumpers. And that looks pretty good. I'm going to do as much of this as I can with the center stock, with the tail stock, the live center in place. It's just safer. Once I get to a point where I have to get the thing done off, I'll have to pull this back. What I want to do is buzz the bottom off this. I'm going to leave some of this, but I need to make it look pretty. And you leave a ring. Hopefully, what it will look like when we're done is that there's a continuous circle that there's a bead on top of. But we'll see how it all turns out. Got to put a mask back on, and we'll get to making shavings again. Turning at 500. This is where we do things with a very gentle, light touch. So now we do axe sanding paste, then we do the axe polish, buff it off with the 3M white, give it 3 coats of shine juice, and it'll be done. One step before that, gotta sign it. I do that pretty basically. Okay, final step will be to buff this off with some triple E buffing compound that'll just kind of fry this into the surface and clean these up. So let's put the buffing wheel on here.
As I flip this bowl over and start buffing the inside, this is the point in which that buffing pad really wants to snatch that bowl out of my hands. Now I'm switching buffing pads so that I can finish the bowl off with some carnauba wax.
And there we have it. It ain't perfect, but it's done. And it's kind of cool. I will put it on the turntable and do some close-ups for you. But we went from green log out in the backyard from the rain to a finished bowl that my wife may even like a little bit because there's the flaw in it. She loves flaws. I guess that's why she married me. At any rate, here come the beauty shots.